Women of Reddit, what do you think about the fall of Constantinople in 1453 by the Ottoman forces led by Mehmed II? I'm not a woman, but I just texted a girl I know asking her opinion, and she told me to never text her again, so I think she's upset about it. Welp, I'm a Greek woman and I'm doing my master's in history, and have done a paper on the music about the fall of Constantinople. In summary, the fall of Constantinople was kind of inevitable. The empire was in its last legs, due in large part to the fall during the Fourth Crusade in 1204. It had a lot of internal and external problems. For example, Constantino's Palaiologos was never officially coronated, due to religious infighting. The Ottoman Empire had already conquered all of the farmland around, and was right to go for the kill at the time that it did. It conquered a great strategic and cultural landmark. The Hagia Sophia had already become a mosque on May 29, 1453, 2:30 in the afternoon. It's a pity for my heritage, but at that time I think it was inevitable. It was very sexy of him to move the ships overland. As an Istanbulite, I love this mess of a city. As a 23-year-old, I don't like that he did it at the tender age of 21. Do you know the kind of pressure our elders put on us because so-and-so's son conquered Istanbul at 21, and we're sitting at home jobless? Very uncool. If our elders left me a massive state with a grand army and big-ass cannons, I would have conquered someplace too. Instead, they are leaving us a fucked-up economy. I like when the leaves change colors in the fall. I don't know if they had leaves, so no opinion. I don't know, if I were him I probably just wouldn't have fell. Hopefully his fall was cushioned by one of the Ottomans. When a guy finally asks me this in a bar after I buy him a drink, and he really listens to the answer, is the day all of my underwear will vanish. Immediately. Edit, there's nothing wrong with buying a man a drink. Your kings deserve a whiskey and coke and a compliment just as much as I do. Most of the ladies I know agree it hadn't been as cool since they changed the name from Byzantium, so good riddance. Miklograd and Slavgrad were color though. So was Nova Roma. Byzantium, Nova Roma, Constantinople, Constantini, Istanbul, Istanbul. It was alright. Well, Istanbul was Constantinople, but now, it's Istanbul, not Constantinople. So, if you've a date in Constantinople, she'll be waiting in Istanbul. Not a woman, but my mom and sister are. I think 1453 was an inside job. Everyone knows Ottoman cannons can't melt Theodosian walls. Why are there so many posts with guys trying to find women based on knowledge of history? Where are my threads asking women what they think of Le Chatelier's principle or Lagrangians? Edit, this is meant as a joke because I see this type of post a lot and I'm a STEM major rather than humanities. I definitely don't intend to tokenize fetishize female scientists. All scientists rock. While a tragedy in terms of the last Christian stronghold in the East, there are many who would argue that the fall of Constantinople was one of the major sparking points to the Renaissance. Without those who fled the distraction of the city, we might never have had the return of Greek and Roman knowledge held by the Byzantines as the true heirs of Rome. In reality, there was not much holding the remnants of the Byzantine Empire alive once the farmland in Anatolia had been conquered. Realistically, the city would only be able to survive for so long. In addition, the Ottomans raising taxes on trade would block off connections to China and India, which would help to encourage the Spaniards and Portuguese as well as the Dutch later on in their maritime shipping interests. Truly, the fall of Constantinople, and in turn the Eastern Roman Empire, was a sad but important event to propel us into the early modern age. These are the right questions to ask women. That's nobody's business but the Turks. There's this awesome docu-drama about him taking over the city on Netflix. That man was a strategic genius. Since many people are asking for the title of the show, it's Rise of Empires, Ottoman. There are dozens of Turkish documentaries and films that have much better production and script about the same subject. However, they all convey some kind of national pride in them. This show portrays both sides of the conflict in a very objective manner, and as for someone who thinks history should be taken into account from every possible perspective, this show is great for that. I'm a woman of Reddit. Honestly, if it wasn't Mehmed, it would have been another Ottoman. Besides, calling yourself the Roman Empire in the 1400s is just gauche. You forgot the single part. Only city in the world that lays on 2 different continents. It's magical. I like your funny words, magic man. Lol, recycled jokes. I don't like how it's called the fall of Constantinople. It should be called the Conquest of Constantinople. I am a woman, though I'm currently studying biomedical engineering and history is my weakest subject. I read through a couple of articles to develop some sort of understanding and opinion. I hope some woman with some more background will be able to provide an even better and more thorough answer, and I hope someone will tell me if I've said anything incorrect. The city of Constantinople was the capital of the Byzantine, Eastern Roman, Empire for a very long time, over 1,000 years, and had survived many attacks up until this point. It had these extremely thick walls, and an army would have had to attack by both land and sea to even try to take it. However, some of these sieges over the years had decimated the population, 400k in the 12th century and 40k-50k in the 1450s. Also, they were also losing their diplomatic power. The Pope's Roman Catholic Europe were not happy that they would not form a union with them, so no significant help could be expected. Meanwhile, the Ottoman Turks had been extending their control over the Balkans and Anatolia, even several Byzantine cities. They had tried to capture Constantinople before, had to suppress an uprising elsewhere, and the new Sultan, Mehmed II, had been preparing to try again. The defenders were very weak at this point, only fewer than 5k men, which could not cover the city's walls. And technology had moved on. These walls were impenetrable up until that point, but this time, the attackers had cannons, large and heavy ones, and smaller ones that could fire more often, as well as 60k, 80k men, as per modern historians. Constantine resisted for about 6 weeks, which was impressive. Though near to the end, chaos reigned, women and children were defending the walls, some of the defenders went back to defend their own families, many killed themselves rather than be subjected to the destruction that came immediately after, and then after that. The Hagia Sophia was converted into a mosque, Constantinople became the new capital of the Ottoman Empire, and the city was repopulated with people from a multitude of faiths and backgrounds. The East had gained quite a bit of power over Christendom, and humanity had moved from the Middle Ages into the Renaissance. Well, it happens. They had it coming for a while. I'm not sure what preventative measures they could have taken to keep this from happening, or how that would have impacted things. Not a woman, but my sister thinks Mehmed II took all the credit and it was actually his close advisor Akshemseddin who did all the heavy lifting. Edit, I want to be clear, I just googled Mehmed II and came up with a bullshit theory to play along with a joke of the op. I don't know a thing about this subject in practice law. Finally, I can answer this. Mehmed II, I believe, tried to live up to his grandfather and father's deeds. This blinded him during the long sieges on Constantinople. Once he decided to use artillery in a way that had never been used before, there was no turning back. The wolf and her cubs, Orban, not only provided drive for the exhausted troops, but also a distraction for the Turks inside the walls. After suffering wounds himself, Mehmed and his advisors, who knows exactly whose idea it was first, decided to circumvent the Golden Horn, pull the boats out of the water, and place them back in on the other side of the boom chain. The gig was up. Morale fell inside the walls, and the best fighters knew it was over. He rode immediately to the Hagia Sophia. He ordered to be protected. He transformed it into a Muslim mosque, solidifying Islamic rule in Constantinople. Mehmed completed his grandfather and father's wish. He didn't stop there. He successfully defended Constantinople and led conquests throughout the surrounding lands. Moria, Trebizond, I liked reading about the Ottoman-Venetian War. Now, what I think about it. Throughout history we see large significant battles and huge stories to go with it. I like that I can really get to the micro-history of Mehmed himself. I sorely wish I could travel back and be a fly on the wall during these times. Throughout the history of humanity, we have fought for land in the name of a god or gods. When do we start to fight for humanity? Would it even be fighting if no one died? The real reason why they fell Constantinople. It wasn't just to fall, its main reason was because that was the bridge which was connecting the eastern Ottoman lands, Middle East, to the western part, Europe. They only had a connection through sea, so they had to get a land connection. Also, the Byzantium there was getting soldiers from Europe to attack several parts of the Ottomans. That way it had become the most important job for them. Many sultans before Mehmed II tried it but failed. Mehmed II was 17 years old when he got as sultan and was successful on taking in Constantinople with 21 years. Correct me if I'm wrong somewhere, I read some books but still I'm not a machine law. The irony, all comments are written by men, probably. No serious tag SMH. I'm a woman and a history major. We do exist. There's tens of us. The fall of Constantinople was inevitable since basically the Fourth Crusade. Even looking back to the Battle of Manzikert, Byzantium was on a very slow decline. In terms of impacts, it was a disaster for Eastern Christians, with the destruction of relics and the dispersal of the religion itself, which can still be seen today as there are a variety of regional Orthodox Christian groups. However, it did prompt a westward move of knowledge, which was key in the rediscovery of texts in the Renaissance. Is it just me who do not understand why women have read it? As a woman, this question features heavily in the list of pickup lines I fantasize about. See also, hey baby, let me tell you my thoughts on why our Richard Lionheart is the worst. I just found a lost book of Livy. It's in my bed. What do you think about the fetishization of the Library of Alexandria obscuring the destruction of all these other repositories of knowledge, or the classic pedicabo ego vos aerumabo? I'm a man, but the fall of Constantinople closed off Europe's trade routes with Asia, specifically China and India. The Ottomans charged enormous taxes on goods passing through their territory, if they even let goods through at all. This led to Europeans looking for new trade routes. The Portuguese were already a pretty navally focused kingdom and were geographically situated the best to begin naval exploration. So they started trading down the west coast of Africa, eventually rounding the Cape of Good Hope into the Indian Sea. These expeditions allowed the Portuguese to develop their naval technology to the point where they could start venturing out into the Atlantic, beyond the side of land, and still reliably navigate. This led to the discovery of the Azores, which sparked a lot of interest in Europe. It was the first time in living memory new lands had been discovered. Portugal's new trade wealth sparked competition with their newly united rival and Iberian Peninsula neighbors, the Spanish kingdoms. The Spanish began funding their own trade voyages to try to compete with Portugal, including, famously, a Genoese explorer named Christopher Columbus. More than half a millennium later, people descended from Europeans who colonized the lands Columbus discovered for Europe, elected an orange fascist president. So I personally blame Mehmed II for Trump's election. While I appreciate the joke, you're repeating a common historical misconception. For one thing, most of the trade between the East and West happened through Egypt. The trade network in the Indian Ocean was probably the most valuable in the world at this time, and the shortest link between the Mediterranean and the Indian Ocean was through Egypt, which the Ottomans wouldn't conquer until 1517, 25 years after Columbus discovered the Americas. Both before and after the conquest of Egypt, the Ottomans didn't tax goods unusually heavily. Obviously there were some taxes, but trade with European states was the economic lifeblood of the Ottoman Empire, so they had an interest in not stifling it. Really, if the Ottomans did tax trade as heavily as you're saying, then you would expect most European mercantile states to start looking into direct routes to the Indian Ocean. Instead, at this point in time, it was only Portugal and Spain that were interested. For the major mercantile states of the Mediterranean like Venice and Florence, the Ottomans were no different from any of the states that came before them, and business kept on as usual. The reason Portugal and Spain started expanding along the African coast is that it was an easy way to expand into new markets and acquire new resources. There were also ideological reasons. Conquering Muslim-held cities in Africa was seen as an extension of the Reconquista, and people wanted to find the legendary kingdom of Prester John. Once Portugal and Spain realized they might be able to access the Indian Ocean by sailing around Africa, that became the goal because, like I said, the Indian Ocean trade network was super valuable. The fact that this was about getting access to new markets and not about acquiring specific goods can be seen by looking at the operation of the early Portuguese Empire. In the early days, the Portuguese didn't make most of their money by transporting spices and other goods back to Europe, as later empires would. That happened, but most of the money came from extorting the trade that already existed in the Indian Ocean, through a practice called cartezes.